Howdy everybody, welcome to Brewing TV episode 2. We're over here in Wisconsin standing on top of some lagering caves.
Underneath this bluff are the lager caves of the former Casanova Brewing Company. In this episode we're going to visit with a beer historian and talk about the history of the caves and what the beers of the day might have been like, and then we're going to do some recreationist historical brewing in preparation for the beer fest going on below us.
That's right, we're going to walk around, have some beers, talk to some people about what kind of beers they like, and then we're going to serve some people our home brews and see how they stack up against those craft brews.
So sit back, grab yourself a beer, and enjoy.
Cheers.
All for brew?
Brew for all.
We're in the woods! As you cross from the Twin Cities into Wisconsin, you pass over the beautiful St. Croix River. On either side of the wide waterway stand large bluffs that overlook the river and the towns below. Towns like Hudson, Wisconsin. If you were brewing lagers without refrigeration, these bluffs would have made a perfect place to dig a lager cave. Back in the day, many breweries did just that, including the Casanova Brewing Company.
Built the brewery in 1896. It was a 3-story building at the end of the parking lot, and right around Prohibition is when she shut down.
Tyrrell Gaffer's family owns and operates the Casanova Liquor Store and the Nova Bistro and Wine Bar, both located on the site of the old brewery. Out back, you'll find the original lagering caves excavated by the Casanova Brewing Company.
Yeah, when we first started, we went to the city and found some of these pictures, and it was cool just looking at some of the pictures, and then you go up into the caves and you can see that hole where that log was that held that kegging apparatus. And it's just cool to find out that's exactly where this stuff happened. And we've had people that have come into the store and been like, this is my grandpa, this is my uncle, I know these two guys, and it's just cool to have there's some names to some of these guys. And then some of the ones we like to show people are the guys sitting on the side of the road for lunch, having a beer, sitting on a keg. That's kind of a cool one. Is people still talk about it. Even 15 years ago, they could have beers while they were working, and it shows they started when they first started. Everybody was drinking on lunch. We don't do that anymore. No, never. This is Casanova's one of their beer bottles. This is one of the ones we did find in the ground when we were excavating for the addition. That was one of the original beer bottles for the Casanova Brewing Company. And then the other one is, once Prohibition hit, they became a Coke bottling distributor, and so this is one of their soda bottles.
The caves piqued our interest, so Brewing TV set out to learn more. We wanted to know how they were used and what the beer was like. We contacted Doug Hoverson, a professor, beer historian, and the author of Land of Amber Waters. We figure he knows a thing or two about the subject. We are underneath a bluff with Professor Doug Hoverson, and this is sandstone, limestone?
This looks like sandstone, but it's a little hard to tell in the dark, and after the years of humidity have weathered it a little bit. But most of the river bluffs in this area have a lot of sandstone and limestone, and those are particularly good rock formations to dig caves in.
Why is that?
Well, it's very crumbly rock, but once you've carved it, it will stay in its shape pretty well.
And it's about 42 or 43 degrees Fahrenheit in here right now. Would it have maintained this temperature year-round, or did it need help?
Well, it was clearly going to need some help. I mean, we think that most of the caves will stay in the high 40s, sometimes get up into the 50s. Some of the deeper caves will stay in the 30s year-round. But the brewers are not willing to trust a large inventory of beer to what the weather might bring.
Sure.
So even a very deep cave was still going to have been filled with a lot of ice at that time. Brewers ranging from the small ones to the mighty Chicago and Milwaukee brewers would be bringing in tons and tons of ice each season, and it would be packed in sawdust, and it would be typically down the middle of the cave, or if there was a big open area, it would be right in the center, and the kegs would be ranged around it.
So at some point, caves like this became obsolete. Why is that?
The biggest reason for that, of course, was the development of a commercially viable artificial refrigeration system. And that was beginning to develop as early as the 1870s and 80s. But by the 1890s, it became practical and affordable for even a relatively small brewery to get a refrigeration plant that would make their own ice and could also keep some sort of storage room cool. The nice thing about that, of course, is running the coolant through the pipes takes up a lot less room than bringing in all the ice.
A lot less expensive.
It's a lot less expensive. You have the occasional worries in the early days of an ammonia leak, but for the most part, the refrigeration was also safer. You didn't have to worry about your ice cutting team falling into the lake. So it also enabled breweries to locate much nearer their markets, and they didn't have to locate simply where there was a good limestone or sandstone bluff.
So Doug, you're not only a beer historian, but you're also a home brewer.
Yes, I have been for probably 10 or 15 years now.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about the intersection of those two interests?
Well, I think being a home brewer has helped me to ask much more informed questions of the brewers I've talked to when I've been doing my research. And it's also helped me experiment with some of the classic styles a little bit more. And it's helped me become more curious about the types of beers that they would have had 120 years ago being made and aged in a place like this.
Late spring, Hudson, Wisconsin, 1915. I'm a brewer. I've got a cave. What am I going to make? What are people going to want to drink?
Well, you're going to bring a couple of interesting things out of the cave in, say, May 1915. And one of the things that we've forgotten recently is that May was when Bock beer was released up until Prohibition. And so the beer that you're bringing out has been lagered even longer. And a classic traditional Bock recipe would be what almost all of these brewers were serving, with a little bit of extra malt in it to bring the gravity up, probably something with just a little bit of specialty malt. And for most of these cases, the hops really aren't going to vary a lot. I think many of the brewers at the time stuck with the hops they were familiar with because the chemistry and the instrumentation wasn't to where it is today, where a home brewer is able to make chemical calculations much more sophisticated than most small to mid-sized brewers could. And so we can adjust the alpha acid in a much more sophisticated way than the average town brewer could 120 years ago.
Last question, Professor Hoverson. Can I call you D-Hove?
You can.
Thank you very much for your time. All right, we're in my backyard at Schloss Dawson. It's a lovely spring day, and we're going to brew a Maibock, loosely based on the specifications given to us by D. Hova in the lager cave at C. Nova. He talked about beers of the day being darker than you'd expect. We're going to anticipate the future a little bit and use about 70% Pilsner malt for a Maibock, Hellesbock. I'm going to use 30% German Munich malt, just to give it a little color in the cheeks and a little bit of a malty kick. He mentioned also using imported and domestic grain at the time. We got a lot of dogs in this neighborhood, and they're all pissed off about the inclusion of some U.S. Pilsner malt with the German 20 EBC. My dog's getting pissed off about it too. She's a German Shepherd, and yeah, this is some BS with this domestic Pilsner malt. I'm gonna stay the course though. We're gonna be using some domestic hops too, some highly domestic hops, some backyard hops. Here comes some barking. There we go. All right, let's check the strike water. Oh, we're golden. Let's crush some grain. Go. Where have you been?
In your basement, drinking.
Man, we got work to do.
Oh, all right.
Thanks for helping yourself.
Yeah, well, you know, I know where the beer is.
I've overheated the sparge water on purpose. We can set it down to cool off. Then we gotta lift the mash back up onto the burner for mash out.
All right. Now, what could happen to not make this a Maibach? What through this brewing process could happen? Right now, if I spit in this, will it still be a Maibach?
It'll just be a contaminated Maibach. I think if we kept the lager yeast but changed the hops, this could become a beer to guard. If we kept the hops but changed the yeast, it could become a strong saison. If we changed the hops and the yeast, it could be kind of a golden barley wine, English style barley wine.
Sorry, Joanna.
That was, let's just pretend this never happened. There, good as new. It's definitely not Dehova dark, but it's not any fading flower either. It's got kind of a nice pale amber color. It smells very malty. Getting some spicy notes from those first wort hops. All right, we've hit flame out. It's time to take the wort downstairs, chill it, ferment it in my basement.
And then we'll take it over to Casanova Liquors to lager it in their caves, and then we'll be serving it in the month of May.
Well, the brewery may be defunct, but the lager cave is still fully funked. You can see the steam from my breath. It's cold in here for a handsome bald man, citizens. It is 42 Fahrenheit and change, so that's a good enough temperature for our lagers to sit. We've got about 6 weeks before the beer fest, and when we see them next, they will be clear and bright and carbonated and served to the public. Let's go get a cheeseburger and warm up.
We're back here in Hudson, Wisconsin at Casanova Liquors for the Beer Fest. Our lagers are done lagering and they're ready to serve. There's also a bunch of craft breweries here. People are here enjoying some homebrew, some craft brew, and some good times. So let's go inside and see what's going on. Brewing TV! We're going into the belly of the beast. I'm pretty sure there's a red dragon back here hoarding a treasure of beer. Or maybe it's a couple breweries. As you can see, the historic caves are alive once again filled with beer. This year's Casanova Beer Cave Fest packed in 250 beer lovers, sampling more than 80 beers from 21 breweries and distributors. These lucky beer geeks were treated to some great flagships, as well as rare and limited releases. Even with all that beer, most agree, the coolest part of the festival is the caves.
We're in a cave, man. I mean, where else are you going to drink beer in a cave with 150 people? It's a good time, and it's good beer.
Because, you know, it's kind of like has that mysterious aura about it.
How often do you get to drink beer in a cave?
The atmosphere. People here love it.
It's like 46 degrees, I think it is, but it's good. It keeps the beer nice and chilled.
What is the art of beer? What does that mean?
That's me. I am the art of beer.
Some breweries had brew staff on hand, many with home brewing roots.
It's pretty exciting, you know. I mean, I think a lot of home brewers, kind of it's a dream of theirs maybe to someday brew beer commercially, and so it just feels really good to kind of gone and taken that step. And it's a lot of work, but you know, it's really cool to see your beer out there in the shelves and then on the taps.
Not to be outdone, the Brewing TV crew proudly served up 2 corny kegs worth of our historically inspired Cave-Bock and Cave Pilsner.
I like it. It's very good. I'm doing the Pilsner. Good job.
I'm a big fan. Yeah.
This is very nice.
I am too, and in fact, I'm empty, so I need to get some.
This is the 4th best day of my life.
We're happy to see beer flowing once again in these caves. This beer festival proves that when history repeats itself, it's not always a bad thing.
Number 1 right here. Number 1 beer in the place.
Irma Reaver.
Delicious.
All right, that brings episode 2 to an end. Thanks to Casanova Liquors for hosting this beer fest. Thanks to all the breweries and brewers who participated.
Big cheers to Doug Hoverson for talking to us about the history and nature of the beers that used to be brewed here. Also, spend lots of money with our lovely sponsors, the Brewing Network and Northern Brewer.
That's right.
Until next time, all for brew.
And brew for all.
Ching. That was a good one.
What do you